And it's
Mhm,
like at some point you just have to like do it.
mhm.
And I feel like if you're really want to do it, then you just have to accept it's going to be messy. You're not going to know stuff. You're going to make mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sarah Rosette.
And I'm Jamie Albright. And this week on the show, we have,
Jennifer Hilt.
yes, we do, returning guest, Jennifer Hilt.
Yes, she has a really fun TropeCon coming up, Trope conference. And we talked to her about tropes and about mistakes and how she recovers from mistakes and understanding tropes across genres and not just how you can, how you can apply them. It was really good. We had a great time talking with her. And
It was. Jennifer's the author of the Trope thesaurus, and then she has books that are genre specific for tropes. And so it was really good. It was a fun interview.
Yeah, so we'll have a link to that in the show notes along with the link to the conference, which is an affiliate code if anyone's interested.
So what's been going on with you?
Let's see. I finally finished the letters that I'm working on.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yay. So, but I mean, like the draft, I've got to go back and, work on it, make sure they make sense and everything. So I got that done, rolled straight into the taxes. Bleh. It took me like 3 days to pull together all this stuff, but got it done. Got that done. And then today I was working on cover concepts, illustration ideas.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, because I have a terrible time describing what I want, or if something comes back, what I don't like about it. I grabbed a whole bunch of cover illustration ideas, went into Claude, and I said, hey, this is my project. Here are some things that I like. And I just pasted the links in there. And I said, this is what it's for. Please write me cover artist brief using these as examples of something that I would like. And it spit out this huge thing and it described in detail the type of artistic style that was needed in words that I would never know to use.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is what this can be really good for, I think, for authors. So it gave me something. And of course, I'll go in and refine it, but it was super helpful for me, especially with the description of like, I don't even know some of these terms. I was like, oh, that's how you describe that. That's how you describe that type of line art or whatever it is.
Right.
So,
that's amazing. That's such a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was cool. But so I've been doing taxes and then we've had a lot of projects going on around the house. Like this is the window. If you live in Houston, you have this little window before it's going to get miserable hot and we're going to be inside. So if we're going to do anything outside, we have to do it all now.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, so we recorded last Thursday. We recorded Elizabeth's episode, Jennifer's episode. And then at 3 o'clock, I had a meeting that day with Becca Mysore, mentioned it. And it was because, in writing this book I'm writing, I wanted to make sure I had it set up for a series or whatever. She was just like, Jamie, just write the book. Like, if you want to add a few fun side characters that could have a book, then do that. But
don't stress yourself out about it.
Yes. You are not in a position right now. Basically, that is a lot of stress to put on a book. And also, it's a good reason not to write the book because then you get overwhelmed. So that was great advice. And so I've just done that. Then that was Thursday. Then Sunday, I met with my monthly. Oh, she also said, write down the things, those yummy things that you love in a book. Write those down. Write down a few transitional scenes that you could see happening. And so I did that. And then Sunday, I met with my brainstorming group and we talked about kind of some ideas. But I did go to the lake with my family, with my daughter and grandchildren. And so I've been there till yesterday, and then I'm at my mom's today. But yeah, I mean, I've written some stuff down. I have some good ideas, and so I'm just gonna sort of pick up where I start. We did change a few things in this story that I had already started, but I'm just going to make some notes and then keep going from where I'm at. So that's good.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, we did talk about Elizabeth last week dictating, and I am going to try it.
Yeah.
Going to try it because I'm so verbal. You would think it would be something I was good at. I just, I don't know. It does scare me.
It feels really weird. It feels very weird. And so when I do it, I have to go, I have to go be off by myself, which is so weird because I'm going to take this text, correct it, and make it good, and then send it out into the world. So who cares if somebody hears me dictating? But I just can't do it if somebody's around me.
I know it. And it's scared. Like, I'm physically scared to do it. And I'm like, why? All I have to do is erase it. It's not like it's going to
not going to,
Yeah, it's not.
But it is a weird feeling. It feels very awkward.
Yeah.
So I would say just stick with it for a little while and see if you can do it for at least a couple of chapters. It still feels strange to me to do it, but I did get over that initial, and part of it is like, you don't know how to do it. You've got to kind of figure out your system.
Your way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it. Not much else. We have something coming up in April, but other than that, nothing much else going on. So we should probably get on with the interview because it's really great.
Yes. Sounds good. All right. So here is Jennifer Hilt. Well, today we are really excited to have Jennifer Hilt here. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
We are glad to have you back.
We're glad.
It's very fun for me.
Jennifer Hilt is a USA Today bestselling author and the creator of the Trope thesaurus and has written 24 books under 4 pen names, including an urban fantasy trilogy, The Undead Detective. As a professional plotter and concept creator, Jennifer has helped countless writers develop unforgettable stories. Holding degrees in linguistics and literature, Jennifer loves collecting obscure dictionaries, binge watching Scandi Norse series, and shouting out tropes from her couch. So we got to talk about Scandi Norse series.
Yes.
And your obscure dictionaries.
Yeah.
That's a great hobby.
I was just thinking, my husband and I are downsizing, and I'm thinking, there's a lot of things that have to go. And I was thinking, but the dictionaries,
You might need to keep those.
Surely you can find a small corner for them. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, give us a quick update on what's happened with you since last you were on the podcast in February of 2023.
Oh my gosh. I was I knew it was February, but I couldn't remember I didn't think it was let's see, since February 2023. Let's see. I came out with the Trope thesaurus fantasy sci-fi and Kickstarter with that and released that. And then I've just been working on more trope stuff. I'm going to do a mystery thriller book for the Trope thesaurus series later this year. And just kind of keep on keeping on with a couple health challenges and things like that where we're like, oh, I don't know about you guys, but it's this is the year I'm going to do all of these things. And then I was like, guess what? So
yeah, exactly. Well, tell us what trope books you do have for people who are new.
Okay. The first book I wrote really during the pandemic is the Trope thesaurus. And that's the one that I think if you're trope curious, start out with that. And then in that book, I hadn't covered any horror. And so people asked me oh, you should write a book about horror. And I was like, oh, I don't really know anything about that. So that was so then I went and did a bunch of reading and watched a bunch of movies and thought about it and stuff. And so that was the second book, was the horror Trope thesaurus, which I say is really my favorite because that was really the book for me that I realized, oh, the thing with tropes is that they're about relationships. And it took me to studying the horror genre and all these subgenres in it to realize that there are actually stories about relationships, because we tend to think, oh, it's like slasher things. Those are the ones that usually pop into people's mind with horror, but there's actually so much more going on in that genre and really realizing, oh, who is a bigger, antagonist or villain, like this nameless, faceless person who just drifts through town, or your best friend who's been all along, working
plotting against you.
Yeah. So that was kind of that for me. That was a really big light bulb moment. And then I did a specific trope thesaurus for romance where I could go into subgenres because that was people were wanting to talk more about that. And then I did the fantasy sci-fi just because I love those genres, and it was fun to kind of go into, again, the subgenres. And in each of the books, I kind of I use different examples, but I also find there's always something new I learned. So like the relationships, and then it was kind of like, oh, community was a lot about romance, obviously. It kind of like when you do that, then I'm like, oh, it's so much forced proximity and like really the power of those things, of those tropes. And then fantasy sci-fi was really just kind of neat learning about how really world building folds into the tropes that we have and how those really work hand in hand. So as Sarah knows, like, because we talked a little bit about it, I think between us was just kind of like, oh, the fun of like doing a mystery thriller now is like getting to like dive into, just watch a lot of really great movies and read and red herrings this and, really fun stuff like that. So that's kind of where I think that's pretty much where I've been since I officially talked to you guys.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that update.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
You've been busy. Had a lot going on.
I don't feel like it's hard to get things done, but then I think, oh, that's me. But then I'll be like, oh, well, I guess I have had things to do. What's in front of you?
When you look back, you've often accomplished more than you realize if you take the longer view. Yeah.
And that's like so important for us to remember as writers, because sometimes it can be so frustrating with like, oh, I'm only getting, like maybe 500 words a day, or, I only can write on the weekends or something, but it really does all add up. So I don't know. I just kind of feel like the longer I'm around, the more I realize that creativity and persistence are really the two things that we have. And the more we can all, as creative people, like lean into those, the better off we are.
I love that.
Well, you've already touched on a lot of things you've learned writing these trope books, but maybe if you want to take it in a different direction, you can. A business type answer, but what's the most important lesson you've learned recently?
Business. Oh, yes. That's always
either, or craft, if you have something else you want to talk about.
Well, one thing that's kind of related is after I finish my mystery thriller one, I want to do a trope thesaurus memoir nonfiction, which seems like a little odd, but it's like I love reading memoirs, and it's like I've been realizing, oh, there's a lot of tropes in here, but there's like kind of a different way you have to tell it as opposed to in fiction. So that's like a project that I'm looking forward to, that I don't feel that's really interesting to me, that I don't feel like I have a lot of a handle on. So that's on one hand scary and yet exciting. So that's just kind of like, I guess, would be a new in a business thing of like, I don't even know what that's going to go, how that's going to go. And then in business, I would say, I think, again, it's like, I feel like on one hand, I'm always trying to like lean into being more me. There's a lot of things that you can do in business, especially with writing. We get a lot of, there's always new social media things, and there's new, always new technologies. And so it's kind of trying to like figure out which of those things can reinforce who you like are at your core. So for me, that's kind of like trying to remember that and not get super distracted by this new thing that everybody's doing, that they're doing great on, and I'm not doing it all. And and like, it's okay, so we do all the things. So in a way, that's kind of been a helpful business lesson for me, because it's taken me so long to write these trope books. I haven't done a whole bunch of other writing since that. I've just been working slowly on this mystery series with my brother, which is really fun, but it takes me a long time to do these books. So it's just kind of like trying to like tell yourself to calm down, and like it's okay it takes a while to develop a brand, is my very inarticulate way, I guess, of saying, of answering your question. And sometimes you don't even know you're developing a brand until you like look back. I didn't think I would write more than one book about tropes, because I just put everything in there at the time that I knew. And I thought, I'm just going to put it in here, and I don't know if anybody will be interested, but it's like all the things that I want to say and that interest me, and we'll just see what happens. And then find it can be helpful for people.
And a few years later, you've got 4 and about to be 5, and
great.
And that's often the way it happens. You think you've written everything about a nonfiction subject,
learned everything,
or there's this series is done, or this is only a standalone, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, there might be more possibilities. Sometimes you have to finish the beginning part, and then you go into more.
Yeah. And the time to let it marinate. Like I really didn't think I would do something beyond the mystery thriller, but then just kind of like the memoir thing and then like talking to some other memoir people. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like see where that takes me, but you just don't know. Like in the beginning, you can't see that far ahead.
Yeah. I was talking to my daughter last night. She is not a reader. In fact, when TikTok went away, she said, I guess I'll read a book. Like, I mean, she is not a reader, but she watched that Ruby Frankie documentary, and Ruby's oldest daughter had written a book. So she ordered the book and blew through it like in 2 days. It's a memoir. And then I saw, because she uses my Prime account, that she had ordered 2 other books, and one was the I'm Glad My Mom Died, and then the other.
Oh yeah.
But she called me last night about it and said that she had just started it, and she said, and then I got another one. It's about a teacher. I thought I should get something, and I said, not about crazy mothers. And she said, I knew you were going to say that.
Right. But honestly, the trauma and tropes thing is like a major thing.
Yes.
And so that's kind of like going to be a really interesting thing to look at. But is your daughter in her 20s?
Yes, she is.
Yes, I have 2. My sons are in their 20s, and the reading, it's been interesting to see the reading or lack thereof. And like one is a reader and one is like, when TikTok went away, briefly or whatever, he was like, same thing. I guess I get a library card.
Yeah, exactly.
My kids are in their 20s too, and they're both like audiobooks. And it's interesting. Like my son the other day, maybe last year, he said, I'm listening to Murder on the Orient Express. I thought I should just kind of see what that's all about. So every once in a while, he dips back into older stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear what they listen to and what they're interested in.
Yeah,
I love that though. Yeah.
Yeah, he was listening to Agatha Christie too. And it was interesting because he really liked it because it moved along.
They're quick.
They don't, I think especially when they're used to like social media pacing,
That's true.
they don't have a lot of like patience for development of stuff in a way that maybe we as, long-term readers do.
Yeah, my daughter has mentioned a couple of times, the chapters are just so short. They're so short, and I'm getting faster, and I'm like, you can just savor it. Like, you don't have to blow through it. But yeah. So that's interesting because I think that is a thing, too.
Yeah.
Well, what is the biggest change you've had to make in your thinking or your mindset?
The biggest change, I think that for me, you don't have to be an expert at something to do it. That it's okay to do a thing, to do it, and you're going to make mistakes, and that's all right. And people are generally pretty nice about that.
Yeah.
And like you wait to be, if I waited to know all the things, I wouldn't have even have published the first book.
Right.
And, so I think that because there's a lot of like in my personal life, well, hopefully they're not listening to this, but there's a lot of really smart people in my family and, close circle of friends who are always going to write a book. And these are like super, like, I feel like these people are way smarter than me, but they spend all their time like thinking about it or getting in like a certain kind of shape or reading a certain number of books. And it's like at some point you just have to like do it. And I feel like if you really want to do it, then you just have to accept it's going to be messy. You're not going to know stuff. You're going to make mistakes. So I feel like kind of being more okay with that has been, and maybe it's just a part of getting older too. There's some kind of nice things about that.
Yeah.
And I'll see that with my kids where they get so paralyzed about like, it's like, it's okay. You're gonna, you're really just, you're not even on the board. I feel like you're just like a fingertip. It's like just to keep going and things. So I think that if you're interested in something, to learn about it, but then don't like get yourself into like a paralysis where you're just like, I have to be an expert before I do anything about it. And that's for anything with, if you write a book and it's not successful in whatever thing, then do it. make a new pen name and write a different, you don't have to like, oh, it's not like I heard a conference somebody say, and it was like an editor, and I was like really objected to that, but I didn't stand up and say it. But they said, well, you don't want to self-publish because if you do that and it doesn't work out, then you've blown your chance. And I'm like, that makes zero sense.
That makes no sense.
That's someone who's probably not really familiar with self-publishing, right?
The industry.
I think it was like a trad person, and like, okay, maybe that's true in trad, but I was that is like the opposite of how it is, So I hope people feel like there's a lot of opportunities for reinvention and experimentation still in our industry, and like kind of remembering that.
Yeah, I have that problem. Sarah knows this. That
Me too.
I mean, we've talked about, or I've talked about, writing a nonfiction book, or people have talked to me about writing a nonfiction book. And I'm like, I don't know anything new. I don't know anything other people don't know.
But you do.
But it's perspective. Yeah, it's perspective.
It's also voice. You have such a great voice, Jamie, that I think, like, you guys know Jennifer Probst, right? Yeah, she's so her. I've had so many people tell me like her Write Naked books.
Yes,
it's like a solace to them, and there's so much that we need with that in this business, right? Because it's so isolating, and in the end, it is kind of you just with the page. But like, I could see Jamie like doing something that totally is like encouraging and like helping somebody like work through their drafts and like, oh yeah. I can totally see you doing that.
But the thing is, it happens to all of us, not just like I can write a fiction book, but it's that nonfiction kind of putting your stamp on something.
Right.
Yeah, I think you put your finger on it when you said I'm not an expert.
Yes.
That's what that held me back for a long time on writing the series book, because I was like, who am I to talk about this serious thing? And I just didn't, I felt like I had an experience with mystery, but like covering other genres, I was like very intimidated.
Right.
So sometimes you just have to push through that and keep going. I mean, I think we all feel it, most of us.
Yeah, and you just don't know, because like the time tropes were like, when I put that out, it was like not as popular as it was now, and there were a lot of people that were like, "Oh, tropes are awful." Like, you're telling people to be terrible writers. And I was kind of like, well, that's not really what I'm saying.
Yeah, you were at the beginning of that wave, so you timed it perfectly.
You did.
Well, how has your business model changed recently?
How does my business model change recently? Oh, well, I guess I'm doing my TropeCon. I guess that would be like trying, instead of just doing my books or doing some classes or doing some Kickstarters, I thought, because there is so much general conversation about tropes lately, I thought, what if we got everybody together? And this is, of course, also selfish, because it's like, what if I got to hear what all these people are saying?
It's a great motivator, right?
Yeah. And I was like, instead of trying to go to all these conferences and track people down or whatever, I was like, oh, what if I did that? And
brought them to me. Yeah.
Yes. And then, because it's like, well, I know what I think about tropes, but I don't know what all these other, and there's so much, because it's such a storytelling staple. Everybody has like their own spin on it and their own way and it's anyway. So the most fun part so I've put together this TropeCon, which I've like I think it's like 12 different people, interviewing them about tropes and, kind of how they use them, how they see them in various topics. Some are more specific and some are genre specific. And I really just followed like what I was interested in or what I would want to know. And that has been really like meaningful for me, and hopefully it's helpful. We'll find out how helpful it is for other people. But again, it was kind of like, okay, it's in my same vein of what I'm doing, but it's like different than a class or something like that. So I guess it was kind of like trying to, on one hand, it's like trying to think about your business, I don't guess, narrowing in, and yet at the same time kind of widening the scope, like kind of almost doing two things at once, of like, oh, how can I bring them to me?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to get back to the TropeCon in another question or two, but I wanted to ask you, how do you view mistakes and how do you recover when things don't go well?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing with mistakes is that I've like learned, that I keep reminding myself, and that I tell my kids a lot, is like, it's so much more like blown up in our minds than for other people. Like it feels like crushing. I'm like, you're just like, oh my gosh, how could I have done this thing? from something like you work so hard to send out an email and like then the link's wrong. And you're like, oh my God, I checked all those links so many times. How can I have, or just to even, I don't know, I'm trying to think of, you just have to, I think there is an element of grace and, you can have some like wallowing in self-pity and you text like, your BFFs and like,
Yeah.
but then it's like, pretty quickly you realized, especially in this day and age, everybody's moving on real quick.
Real quick. Yeah.
And a lot of times I think people don't even notice. It's just kind of like we get really stuck in like this cycle of, it's hard for us to move on. And I guess I can give you an example and you guys can decide if this is too long-winded or not. But when I first sent out my trope, when I was first doing that, I queried a whole bunch of podcasters. I didn't know what I was doing, so clearly. So anyway, I queried a bunch of really, really big names and nobody got back to me except for Joanna Penn. And I decided that I would do my first ever podcast. She wanted to interview me. I was shocked. I was like thrilled, but shocked. And she was the first ever podcast interview that I did. Was this a smart idea? No, it was because I didn't know how to be a guest on a podcast. I didn't have any, I had asked somebody and they said, well, whatever you do, don't talk about the book because you want people to buy your book. And I was like, okay, well, then I went and joined a Penn's podcast and I didn't know how to talk about tropes, or I felt like I couldn't talk about tropes, which is the only thing that I know how to talk about. And to this day, if I ever see her in person, I need to she probably doesn't want a hug, but just say thank you because like 10 minutes into it, she was like, let's pause for a minute. She's like, what's going on here? And I was like, she's like, I'm like, that's my first podcast. I mean, like, what an idiot, And she was so gracious. She was like, okay, well, you just need experience. And she said, and I still remember, she's like, I really love your book. You have really good ideas in here. It's different. And she said, I get people who pitch me a lot, who have a lot of experience, but they don't really have new ideas. And so she said, but you need to learn how to be a guest on a podcast. I don't have time to teach you, obviously. So you need to go and, get experience and come back in 6 months and we'll talk. And it was like, she showed such incredible grace because she could have been like, well, you are a total loser. Anybody should, and just because, yeah. So I did all that and I came back and she let me, do the podcast and I was like extremely grateful. She was wonderful and all this kind of stuff. And I was still pretty nervous, but I think it's a really good example of like, I can't even tell you how upset I was when we ended that call. Like,
I imagine.
I was literally like, my career is done. I have complete, and I was so, anyway. So I guess my reason for telling you this long-winded story is like, you just keep going, you know?
Yeah.
And I was so embarrassed and so ashamed. And like, I should have like done all this stuff before, but then you know how when you're worried, you put it off more and blah, 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 blah. So it's like, and she was just awesome. And I really am grateful to her for to this day for showing that kind of grace in me. So I think you just keep going is the biggest thing, but it's really easy to want to like curl up and die.
Especially in that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, at that time.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great story because it shows that you can recover from mistakes, but they're very painful, And some people take things harder than others, I think. I take everything hard, anything, that could go wrong.
Me too.
It just like hurts my very soul. But, you get a little down the road and you look back and you go, okay, that really wasn't that bad. I made too big a deal out of it.
Right.
My husband always says nothing is written in stone. And it took me years I kind of sort of agree with him now that no matter what happens, it's okay. It's just, it may feel awful in the moment.
Yeah. And really kind of extending that grace to yourself as well as like others. Like I just like anytime I see somebody who's like new in a job or they're like in a, like somebody who's struggling with something, you're like, you get it, because you've been there. And then like for them, it's like so hard that it's just like, for us to be like, it's okay, time, whatever. So I think just the resiliency is like the back of business. Is really just kind of coming back. And then since we're all about the same age, there's this great quote in Seinfeld where George and Elaine are talking, and then he says, "When did we stop talking about me?" Like about that all the time because I think of like, even though like for me that felt so crushing and I like literally like cried my eyes out for probably like good 12 hours. Did Joanna Penn have a bad day because of it? It was probably annoying for her because she had to reschedule and stuff like that. But, it was like, so it's so our experience can be very singular in that way. So it's like you just got after you have your cry session, suck it up and move on.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, and I love that she was gracious enough to give you another chance. Like she could have continued on and gutted that interview out and it would have hurt your career. I mean, it could have hurt you, but she knew enough to say, no, let's not. And I mean, that just is what makes her a pro, but yeah.
Yeah, and I was and it was just so ironic too, right? Because when I tried to explain to my family, like, imagine it's like you just put a book out and it's like Oprah, like she was like Oprah of, and so I've just gone on to Oprah and sounded like an idiot. So
But
yeah,
like you said, it all worked out.
yeah. So you can bounce back, other people really show you such grace that we can offer the same thing.
Yeah.
That's an awesome story. Okay, so let's get back to TropeCon. So so you kind of told us how it came about. I thought people might be interested in hearing about it because if they wanted to do an online event with readers, say something, that they've planned for online, give us some details about like how you went about setting it up, like the tech you're using, because I think people have questions about stuff like that.
Yes. There's a lot of it's almost overwhelming the amount of options there are out there. I think there's like the first, like you just kind of have to think about how you want to visit with people or how you want to like generate community, and the options to do that can be a lot. I'm using Teachable because I already had some classes set up on it and I had some familiarity with it. And there's a way that you can charge, even though that's like, I'm not making this like an expensive thing because it's an experiment. I think there's a learning curve I find with Teachable that, let's just say, that I find stressful. But it's kind of like once you learn it, then you're like, okay, I get how I can repeat the experience. If I was going to do it again, I would almost think that YouTube is a really nice way to do it because I feel like YouTube is really easy to work with. And if you aren't going to charge, especially if you were just going to like do a reader event, I think that YouTube is easier to operate personally. So that would be something I would think about how to do that. There might be some ways to charge on YouTube, but it's like you get very easily things, whatever like kind of question you have, it can generate like 3 more questions that you have to go down this road to answer. So I was really just trying to like do this as a trial and see if it works or if there was interest in it beyond, me. Because it's really neat how we have the advances of virtual technology so that we can do these different kinds of things. Because when we all started, you had to go to a conference in person.
Yeah.
As we know, that can get really expensive and all the logistics and stuff like that. So it is kind of a neat thing that's come out of, the last like 6 years or so that things have, expanded in the virtual sense. So I'm doing that. I don't know if I would do it again. We'll kind of see how that goes. But I would say I would look at, there's other platforms like that too. You really kind of want to think about, the first thing you want to think about is like, what is your goal, I think. And so my goal was like I said, kind of answer this question of like, what can I learn and are other people interested? And then you want to think about how can I build a community on that in a budget I can afford? There's like lots of really great things out there. And it just depends on your, like, for example, there's something called Airtable, which looked like fantastic and all this kind of stuff. But I am not like a techie person who's going to spend hours like creating these little rooms and doing all these things. So there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do out there, but it's just kind of, where does your interest lie? I'm always more interested in the content and always less interested in marketing. And so I think content first, and then later I'm like, oh yeah, I got to figure out a way to like tell people about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which a lot of us do that, like with our books and everything.
So that's why it's kind of like a thing to think about is like, how will you tell people about it? Like for reader events, I think Facebook could also be another way to do like a something through that. And then probably that would be, you wouldn't, there's so many, especially of readers, I feel like in our age group that are already on Facebook. That would be something else I would investigate in that. So it's just, the thing is like you're going to have to, unless you can afford to hire somebody to magically take this away from you, or you have like a significant other who is like, some kind of, prince or princess who's just like, let me take that off your hands. I will figure all the details out.
Rare, very rare.
Yeah. You're going to have to wrestle with some of the like logistics, I guess. So that's the part that I have been finding challenging about it. Not insurmountable, but challenging. I guess I would say I would start with like whatever kind of mailing list you have and use that to like generate how interested people are or what they're kind of looking for too, is like a first step.
Yeah. And it's a good approach to take, that you're testing the waters, especially if you're doing something new. And so maybe you don't want to sign up for a huge teaching platform that, you have to, that a lot of those, they have so much going on. YouTube would be a good option. You're thinking like you would record the sessions and then just post them on YouTube. Yeah. I mean, that's a super simple way to do it.
Yeah. And you could do live, then you can do live stuff too with YouTube, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because I think people really want live, but then the reality of all our busy lives is almost always after people are like, oh, I want a live event, is like, I can't make it at that time. Is it going to be recorded? Like,
and just getting like 3 people together at the same time can be like, okay, 6 months from now, we're scheduled out.
Yeah. Really hard.
I think that's kind of like, even though I think that's kind of the nice thing about doing some pre-recorded stuff, is that because you have that thing, or if you do live stuff, to record it and people can watch it later, because there's the whole scheduling thing. And then the other thing to think about, which I just finished yesterday, I did a talk with the Women in Publishing and she does this like great big, and it's like all apparently live. And I never have got to ask her, but I would love, like, how did like she handle that stress wise? Because she's got like 4 presenters an hour, I think, over 4 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. 4 presenters an hour for 4 days, like, so you're thinking like an 8-hour, that's a lot of people to like, everybody shows up and their Zoom works and blah, 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 blah. And that was like a level of stress that I was like realizing was beyond me to try for an inaugural event. So that's why I wanted to do like pre-record the sessions with people first. And then I am really looking forward to chatting with like people who attend live about those things. But that was kind of like my middle ground of how to do that. So I think that that's kind of a nice way to get started, because then you aren't, because stuff happens, links don't work, people get sick.
Yeah, sure.
You guys are very familiar with all that stuff. So I think that's a way you really could do a great reader event. You could like interview some authors ahead, like your favorite authors, and then like talk with readers at the time about what did you think about this or that. And
those are great ideas. I love that. Well, how did you set your price? And what is the price?
Yeah, that was like a really hard thing to figure out for me. So I set it for $79 because I was trying to make it like accessible, but yet it's like still been a lot of work, and I had to get help with like all the video editing and all those kind of things. So that was how I did it. A lot of it is like, there's a lot, you kind of look and there's all kinds of stuff around, and then you just kind of, for me, I was hoping that I would get a variety of people, and I wanted to do, I guess the other thing I should mention is, because there were some people like, oh, you should do it like genre specific, like a romance one or a mystery one. I love multi-genre stuff because most of us write in more than one genre. And even if we don't, we kind of secretly want to, I feel like. And I also personally have found the stuff I've learned the most from has been from a genre that I'm not actively writing in, kind of like the horror example. Like, I learned so much about that because I wasn't as familiar with it. And yet I could like see these story elements from a different angle. And that's why I really wanted it to be multi-genre, even though probably it's not the best business decision. I probably should have done more of like one genre or another. But my kind of overarching goal was to have this discussion, a general discussion, and expose people to a bunch of different ideas. So I think that's kind of like also a thing to think about in terms of like your scope or your focus. So anyway, that was kind of, so we'll see, because, maybe your romance writers were like, oh, you only specifically have, like, I have quite a few romance writers on there, but it's funny because they also want to talk about stuff that's not just romance, But so anyway, that was kind of how I came to that price. I don't know, would I do it differently? Yeah, I would probably. I don't know. We'll see next year. I would have done it. I honestly thought about doing it free, but in addition to like the cost of like my time and then like, all this stuff, I feel like in a way, if it's free, no, there's no urgency or people don't really care.
There's no investment. Yeah.
And it's like, I would be so bummed if I like, put all this time into it and like 3 people showed up, and like,
Right.
and then it's like, oh, it's free. So we can always like look at it on YouTube. So who cares,
Right.
So I was trying to like a little bit skirt that barrier. And then it's going to be available for a year. So people can watch it, go back at any time and listen to it. So then I was trying to like make it accessible, but then like, oh, if I want to reuse the material or I don't know, do something different with it or things like that. So it's a lot of trial and error for me, at least. I've talked to other people who've run virtual cons and they're always super supportive. Almost always they're like, oh my gosh, it's so much work. But there's that sense of like everybody steps into something new the same way the first time. So, I'm like, yours like was so great and you did all that. Like, I struggled with all the same things when I did it. So it's kind of helpful to learn that and that you're just like doing the best you can.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you'll have like more. It's kind of like with writing until you get that first draft done, you can't revise it. And this is kind of like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then I guess the logistics are just, 12 interviews. I'm going to have 2 live sessions on the weekend and then 2 live Q&As. And then a Facebook group that we can kind of chat in. So that's kind of my plan for it right now.
That's a good plan because it's a blend of recorded, but then also live. And you mentioned the community aspect of it. So I think that's a great thing that people are looking for. And people want to talk about this with other people, these tropes and things and their writing process and stuff. So I think that's a good plan. Oh, you mentioned a little bit about like letting people know. So how are you getting the word out? I mean, obviously you're going on podcasts, but what other, or do you have any other things that you're doing?
So number one, I would say start with your mailing list. Obviously, any kind of like podcast, any kind of promo. Then you can also do, because I am charging for it. People can use it can be the affiliate for it. So like you can, and I'm doing a 50-50 split with that. So it's, not a huge amount of money, but yet it's like really just again to get the word out. And then so like say you have a group of writers that you work with, you can be affiliate and see if any of those people are interested in it. So it's like newsletter sharing and obviously podcasts with you guys. I've just started a Facebook ad that I have to spend some time with tweaking. A lot of word of mouth of like creating all these teasers and like posting and things like that. I have like different conference stuff that I've been doing. So then I mention it in those. So like yesterday I mentioned it for the women in publishing. So it's kind of helpful to have those things in a Substack. It's like everything else. It kind of like it adds up, at the time you're like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out, And there's so many things going on right now that it is really hard to get, people are busy and there's so many competing things. So it's just to kind of like try to, as much as possible, share with other people and those kind of things to get the words out. So I don't have a magic bullet for it.
Yeah. Nobody does. So that's totally fine.
I've learned how to create a Google swipe file, which was new for me. I haven't.
There you go. Yeah.
So it's like just all these kind of, and like figuring out again, like how to use the affiliate links and get the correct links to people and then get them signed up. And the fun part is like talking to people at the time. And then like the back end stuff is like figuring all this stuff out. And all the teasers and, quick design and things like that.
Well, that's great. Well, what do you wish you'd known about setting up an online conference?
Yeah. What do I wish I'd known? That it's so a lot analogous to writing in that like we love writing, right? But writing the book is only 50%.
Yeah.
And this is I feel like a similar thing because I would like really want, I have all the interviews done except one. And so I'm like, oh, yay, have all the, and working and get them all trained. And that was the other thing is I wanted to I've become more aware that like people need, especially this was another like kid thing that I noticed that my kids always want to watch things with the subtitles on. So I was like going to make sure that the interviews had subtitles, they have an audio version, and they have a transcript because so people can use it in different ways. And that was something that I don't think I really thought about before.
Right.
And it's like, oh, becoming aware that people consume something, the same kind of media in different ways. So that was just like a little kind of thing I've learned along. Luckily, there's a lot of different ways to do that now that are a lot easier than I thought. Like at first I was like, oh my gosh, how do you do this? But there's a lot of cool programs that can help with that. I guess just, in a way, I think you just have to do it. And I would try to like be modest about your goals with it. And I would try to realize you're going to make mistakes and it's okay but still do it. Like theoretically, I should have waited probably a year to do it, right? Like learned all this stuff and all this kind of thing. But I was I was very nosy. I wanted to talk to like these people now. And so why should I have to wait a year?
Exactly.
And sometimes if you wait, then it kind of peters out and your excitement and it kind of burns off. And then you're like, yeah, I really don't need to do that. So
And I can't imagine having to like figure out promoting it for a year would have killed me.
Yeah.
Just knowing before it's like it's just going to be work and it's probably going to take more work than you think. And
Yep.
so don't like add this on top of an already full schedule.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because I always find it's kind of like house projects, something that you're gonna take an afternoon takes you like the weekend.
Yes.
I would say this is similar in that like because I would like wanted to be finishing up the mystery thriller trope book. Am I doing that? No. So so it's this kind of realizing, okay, well, I will get back to that when this is done, but this is just kind of how it goes in the meantime. So I think just kind of clearing the deck in a way because there's going to be things that come up and you have questions and to get solved and things like that. So a combination of grace and also like pre-planning and preparing for what you don't.
Yeah, I think comparing it to a home improvement project is a perfect example because they never go how you think. And you always end up going to Home Depot like 4 times just to get what you needed.
Never. And then you don't have batteries. Once it's done, you don't have any batteries.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yes, it's kind of very much that way. So, but I guess I wouldn't want people to think, don't try something like this. I think it's really fun but just don't also like put a ton of pressure on yourself, just kind of like, oh, I'm going to try this thing, see how it works. Not going to put a huge amount of financial investment in it. And, people have been super nice about participating and sharing it. And so just kind of reaching out to your network is probably the biggest thing about that.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
You mentioned something that I think is important that I want people to hear because I think they can use it in different ways, but it's how people consume things and using the captions and stuff. I've used captions on everything now because it was brought to my attention that, people, really like that. And it's being considered of people who, don't hear as well. But also, like with my TikToks, there are a lot of people that watch TikToks with the sound off. And so, I just put captions on everything now. I don't even think about it anymore. I just hit the caption button and it creates them. You don't have to do it yourself.
Very awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you guys heard of the second screen effect?
Like people have multiple screens going at the same time? Oh.
So I actually...
Oh, well, yeah, I do that. But I didn't know it had a name.
Yeah.
Other than ADHD, but go ahead.
Right. No, but I keep reading about it. And the reason why I saw it is because Netflix apparently sends notes back to their showrunners saying, second screen effect with this. So like basically they want you to be able to watch a movie while you're on your phone and not be lost, because if you're lost, you're going to turn off Netflix. You're probably not going to put your phone down. And so they're calling it the second screen effect in terms of like where you sometimes if I've noticed lately when you're watching something, it's like, well, they're like repeating some plot point that we knew earlier. Why do we have to be reminded in the middle of it? It's the second screen effect. Because we're doing multiple things at one time. And so it's kind of like that was what helped me realize, oh yeah, like that's why, like this, like Jamie was saying, is like people are doing multiple things, so you might as well have ways that they can do that. And the same thing with like a lot of times with podcasts. I personally like transcripts
Yes,
because
there
I'm
are a lot
patient.
of people that do.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm impatient and I can read it. So I was like, oh yeah, but again, it's but anyway, that's really interesting, this whole second screen effect in terms of how it's actually influencing pacing and things like that in various, commercial genres. But I think it also affects our business too with,
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
Well, this has been great.
it
Thank you for
is.
coming on and sharing about the con and about your
Yes.
planning, behind the scenes. So we like to ask everyone, if you had to start over today, what would you do differently? Like, could be with the conference, could be with your writing, however you want to take that.
Yeah, that is a great question. If I had to start over today, I think if I had to start over today, I would probably just follow my own voice. And I spent a lot of years trying to write like other people because I thought that was what you were supposed to do, because who would be interested in my particular voice or opinion? And I think I wasted a lot of time and energy on that. And I think that if I had to go over and do it again, I would follow that and not be like, oh, romanticy is really hot now. I need to write like the romanticy authors and, the popular romanticy authors. And I feel like that's like the biggest thing is I feel like if we lean into really our own creative storytelling, we're better served in the long run. And you can like pull things in to make it more, commercially viable and things like that, but not trying to sound like other people. I spent a lot of time doing that.
Great answer. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here. This has been so great. Tell people where they can find out more about you, your books, and the con.
Well, thanks. You can just find all that information out from my website at jenniferhilt.com.
All right. And that's
Awesome.
Hilt, Hilt.
It is. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Yeah, it's been fun. And we will have affiliate link for the con in the show notes. Yes. Yeah. And so that will be at wishidknownforwriters.com. And if you found value from the podcast and want to support us, you can go to that same link /support. So we'll see everybody next week.
Bye.
Bye.